again for another episode of the Warrior Poet Project podcast. What's up, Cory Allen? You're just talking about how you can make your own ammo for any firearm.
That's
necessary.
right.
People wouldn't expect that if you've listened to me and Cory Allen rap on this podcast. They may not know that you can make some ammo.
Yeah, well, here's the thing is that, you know, just because one person has a particular, like character or packaging that they're wearing, you think that you get the idea about what's going on, but really,
don't get it twisted.
In order to get that far, into one area, you have to also have the range of darkness in the other area.
I fucking hear you, man. You're talking to the self-monikered warrior poet.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, whenever I was a kid, my parents were separated when I was really young, and my dad was just uninterested, in spending any time with us. But what he was interested in was shooting guns, and he was a pretty well-off banker type.
Mm-hmm.
And
so he had lots of access to
access. He was pretty racist and a bigot and very materialistic.
Bigot with guns.
Very very manipulative businessman. He used to laugh and joke about like whenever he would fire someone or pull some type of deal, he would come home laughing about it. Not that I ever saw him, at that junction, but he would tell me about it, on the phone. So anyway, so
he's got a lot of things going for him.
Yeah. He, he's told me a lot of great stories about, putting a desert eagle down someone's throat and choking them with it and telling them that he was the devil and that he was going to kill them and stuff.
So this is one of those interesting stories where some kind of force, it either is going to create a duplicate of that force, it's going to break the force, or it's going to create the antithesis of that force.
Yeah, he was kind of like a Tarantino movie character to an extent, in one dimension. But the point of that is that the time we'd spend together when I was a kid was rare, but whenever we were together, we would go to the gun range. So basically,
that was bonding time.
Exactly. It was shooting, every type of pistol, shotguns, rifles, semi-automatic rifles. And then going home, he had a gun room in his house. He had a bunch of safes, like giant gun safes full of guns and ammunition and, a bunch of cash and stuff. And basically, we would just sit.
Sounds like Nicolas Cage from that drug running movie.
Sure, yeah. Except it was ego running.
Yeah.
It was ego running, not drug running. And so we would basically just sit and pack ammo, like either bullets or, shotgun shells, put the casing on, put the primer in, put the gunpowder, put the cork in, and then put the shot in and clamp it closed in this rotating machine. Just sit there and print up, couple thousand rounds of ammunition, man.
Now, do you have any brothers and sisters?
I got a brother that's older.
Now, how similar to you is your brother?
He's similar. Yeah,
So both of you, because a lot of times you hear these cases and you can read about them and hear about them where, one kid goes one direction, either like their father, the other kid goes absolutely the other way. But in your case, both of you guys kind of turned out into, instead of mimicking some of those traits, you went the opposite way.
I mean, even as a look, my brother, he was older, so he took the brunt of a lot of it. Unfortunately, the more, the physical aspects of that, situation, which was unfortunate. And, whenever, my mom made it really clear to my dad with a knife that he better not, he was mean to my older brother, and he better not do it to the new kid, Wow. So
your mom was kind of a badass.
Yeah, she's a lion, not even a lioness, a lion with talons. Yeah.
I think that's called a griffin.
A griffin, exactly. But yeah, it's it was interesting even as a kid, like growing up and seeing how he would treat, just his perspective, man, his outlook on life. And I had an intuitive feeling like it was gross and cringy, and I thought, this isn't how I want to be. It's hateful. And even as a kid, I saw that it was hateful, but it was all based through fear. It was like, that's something that kind of brought that to my attention at a young age, was that a lot of people, their hatred and their aggression is an act of defensiveness through fear. It's like, if I am mean and
it's almost always.
Yeah.
And even all this ego stuff is all fear.
Yeah. Yeah. The meaner you are to people, the more at arm's length they are, so therefore they can't attack you, And I saw that, and as I got older, he died when I was 20. and I watched them turn the machines off on him and all that fun stuff. And it's whenever I'll tell you, that's a sobering moment, watching the heart monitor decrease in beats per minute. But it's just it was all a teaching, man. It was all a lesson to know, like, this is not. I know what this creates. I know what type of energy that life creates, and it's not wasn't what I was interested in. So my brother and I both, went the other direction.
And that's to your credit. I mean, I think everybody gets you get choices. And I've actually been reading a lot of Bruce Lipton's book, Biology Belief, and one of the things that he impresses as his major thesis is there's been a lot of rhetoric about how deterministic your your DNA is and everything, and how deterministic even your situation is. People like to remove responsibility and say, how could he help it? He had this situation, or how he's sick. Of course, it must have been his DNA. And of course, there's some truth that those are influencing forces. Those are winds pushing in a certain direction. But we have a lot more control and a lot more free will than I think people are willing to acknowledge. And I think the science of epigenetics is showing that the ability for you to basically change the expression of your genes through your behaviors, your state of mind, your consciousness, placebo versus nocebo effect, the power of the mind over your health, and then the power of your intent over your destiny. It's, if you take those moments, and I know that's one thing that both of you and I have staunchly in common, is if you take moments to quiet everything away and find your true voice, that's how you stop this kind of rat wheel of influence, where you can actually take a pausing point and say, all right, what do I want to do? I feel the current behind me this way, but I don't have to swim with it. I can swim upstream, I can go across, I can find another current, but you got to stop everything in order to do that. And the ways to stop it: meditation, float tank, psychedelics. That's the way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a lot of people, I think, especially in the pre-internet age, they just lived unexamined lives. There was no self-examination. There was no internal inquiries or quest, or because I think it's easy if you're born into a certain situation, and you have a certain nature and nurture thing going on, then
is it easy, or is it even more difficult?
No, I was going to say it's easy to just continue on with that. If you never have an experience in your life that wakes you up to other realities, or wakes you up to the fact that perhaps being a aggressive capitalist materialist solipsistic type of personality is not, it's just all a trap, it's all a lie, it's all like in so many people, they just don't have the moment in their life where they realize that, and there's nothing that cracks that shell where they go, oh, wait a second, this isn't actually, this is all an illusion, man. And like I was driving the other day, and I saw this brand new Mercedes that was pretty sweet, and there was the lady that was driving it was like this 80-year-old lady, and I just like, it like broke my heart. I thought she was just, it's the whole thing, she was just tricked. She was fooled, the whole thing.
But maybe not. Maybe she loves that fucking car.
Well, I'm sure she does, but that doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's sweet to have, an awesome car, absolutely. But, in the context of the way that I could just, I don't know, something about, you can see how someone is existing with an object like that. It's like, if you have
it depends on if they're appreciating, the presentness of being with that object,
right,
and enjoying that, or whether they're using the object as a fulfillment of some ego, some kind of manifestation of self-worth.
Yeah,
so it's not the object, it's the relationship to the object. And I have an issue with a lot of people who say similar stuff like that, like, talking about money, like money is evil.
No, it's not at all.
It's your relationship to money that can either be, healthy or unhealthy.
Yeah, and that's
your
just
relationship to the car that can be either healthy or unhealthy.
Totally. That's like the first step. That thinking of that way is just the first step in all of that, where like it's not about, as you said, it's about how you treat the object, not if you use the object as a form of self-identification.
Right.
If you use that object as a symbol in your own mind for your worth or something like that, then it's obviously bad because
unhealthy.
it's using you. You're not using it. But it's, being a human being on this planet with all these fun toys you come up with is amazing, and having an awesome car is super fun. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a beautiful genius of human innovation and engineering. That stuff, I love it. It's amazing. But it doesn't mean that, it's all, but if you, it's not going to, do anything other than get you further away on the internal journey. But if you have a sweet car and you let it define you, then if the direction you're trying to go is one of awakening, then it'll hinder you a little bit from getting there. But if it's not, then enjoy.
Well, the other way to look at it is that, people think that, like, to follow the internal journey, you can take the way of the monk, and you can have no temptations, and you can have no properties, and you can have no tangible things.
That's just the same thing as
but isn't
being materialist.
That's another aspect of it. But that almost makes it easier to do that. The real challenge, and I believe that people grow and become better through challenges. The real challenge is to do that not in a monastery, where all of the temptation is removed, but live that way, have that Christ consciousness, that kind of Buddha mind, whatever way you want to talk about it, but have that in a life that's rich and full of all of these things, understanding, as the Toltecs did, then, in Castaneda's philosophy, that all of that is part of the controlled folly. It's playing out some enjoyment, but not being attached to it. And for me, I think that's an even more noble way to go. And the way that I personally am choosing to do it as well is saying, I don't have to give up everything to try and be at this part of, consciousness. Why not have everything, use it as a challenge to not get attached to it and try and live that way? And I think that's another path that I think people don't really acknowledge as a valid way. Yeah,
challenges, I look at that as like, in order to create pearls, a clam needs sand to, be washed through there to have it be agitated, But even all that is just like, again, it's just like the bottom layer of a bottom level of all of this thing. It's like the no objects, and living a monastic life, or, being a, way, super materialist and thinking that that's where you find your meaning is all that stuff. Like, both of those paths are still baby steps. It's because to believe in the illusion that either of those external body surroundings, that you're dealing with, have anything to really do with the real truth, is also something that it's not even on. It's really, it's the earliest stage of even understanding, because whenever you actually begin to, I think, become a bit more awake of the human situation, you realize that the idea of either of those paths, they're both just silly. They have no real place in anything. Even the body is silly. It's like being obsessed with the body, and even the thought about your own body or any of that stuff is ridiculous. Like, I was thinking during South by Southwest, and I was thinking about, like, people. I was saw people in lines, and of course, as always, people are stacked up in lines, ready, trying to get into a show. And I was like thinking about that, and I started laughing so hard that I was crying, because I was thinking about, like, all these people, they're like, I need to get my consciousness package on the other side of this concrete wall. That's the most important thing. That's going to define me. I must get it. And I think when I'm trying to book a flight or something, and I don't get the flight I want, I'm thinking about, like, I need to get my meat body on this tube. It's got to get in the tube, or else, and I'm like, it's so fucking stupid. I had
that realization, and those are great illustrations of it. But I caught myself looking in the mirror like a couple of weeks ago, and it's just kind of like a habit. You look and like, oh, but then I was thinking, what the fuck is the purpose of that? You spend so much time like investigating your, as you said, your meat package, your chimp body, and I'm just thinking that's just really quite foolish. I just spent some time meditating, so you have that other way to look at things, and so many people use that as they're so attached, and that's one of the hardest things probably to become unattached from is your body, yourself.
And there's interesting, like, well, one, I think it's like a puppy seeing its own a reflection in the puddle. It's that base level of like, whoa, I exist. It's like, whoa, that's weird. What is that? But and then there's also you can start kind of fine tuning that, where you can either go crazy and be like, yeah, it doesn't matter, and you can be one of those Indian gurus that has like ants eating his arm at all times, and he's all skinny, and he's so unself-aware of his image that he's just like decaying. But there's with everything, there's just this nice middle ground of it all, where it's like, well, yeah, I make sure my hair's cut and I, trim my beard and don't look like a goofball. But at the same time, it's like not being enamored by it. And that's something that, as a bit of a tangent here, like creatively, there's, I've been thinking a lot about this creatively, about the difference whenever you're in the creative process between artistic or creative intuition or enamorment. And that was interesting. I was working on a couple of new pieces of music, and
enamorment. I imagine you could define that as, what would you define enamorment as? Being
like seduced by your own ability to think of something, and being like reveling in your own thought. It's like, so you're working on some type of project, and you think, the difference between, here's an idea, and you're like, oh, that's great, I'm going to apply this to whatever thing I'm working on, the bigger picture thing, I think that there's this division where it's like, well, is that following your intuition of this creative thing, or is that you just came up with an idea and you're interested in the fact that you came up with an idea, and so you'd apply it to this image? Mm-hmm. It's splitting the intuition and the enamorment with the body and mind's ability to generate little balls of meaning, and by the way, that was like a sharp right turn that I took when I started talking about that from what we were talking about. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing where you apply that to other parts of your life, is where I'm going with it. Is like, a lot of people try and spend a lot of time, and I spent a couple of years in like existential paralysis, thinking about like trying to find and understand meaning, and where that comes from and how that exists and fits into your life. And of course, in the end, I basically deduced that, the life being a transient type of hallucination, and living a subjective reality out of the objective universe, that meaning is simply what you create for yourself, And so in that process of generating meaning and finding the path within your own life, is this thing that I'm creating and applying meaning to, is that my intuition, my internal, if you want to call it your spiritual intuition or what have you, or is this my enamorment with the ability to create meaning within things?
Yeah, and I think at the deepest level, enamorment is another form of attachment.
Yeah.
I mean,
hell yeah.
And yeah. So many things come back to these very basic concepts of attachment, fear. Those are the things that, and attachment is what creates fear, ultimately. When you're attached to anything, that's when you're afraid. Even attachment to life creates fear of death. Attachment to the body creates fear of suffering. Attachment to wealth creates fear of loss. Attachment to your identity as an ego creates fear of rejection, creates fear of whatever else, fear of failure. Yeah. All of these things kind of come to it. So at the base level, removing yourself from attachment to these things and realizing that, you're going to be okay no matter what happens all the way. And that's what something like ayahuasca is great at, takes away the big one, which is that fear of death, and saying, if I die, it's just a myth anyways. Yeah. I'm not really dead. It just means this turn's over. I'll start another turn.
Exactly.
But in the meantime, I'll experience some other really cool thing that doesn't involve form.
Right.
And then I'll surely get another chance. Obviously the ayahuasca didn't show me about the other chance, but it only makes perfect sense that that's what would happen. Yeah. But it did show me about the other world that's out there. Right, so then you start with that, and that's attachment to life. And then the hard one for me was attachment to, my physical self, so I still had a fear of suffering. And that's probably my biggest challenge that I'm working on. And understanding that, acceptance of whatever reality is going through your body eliminates actual suffering, even if you're experiencing pain,
Yeah.
And so getting rid of that, and then getting rid of your attachment to your persona and your success. And then so you just break down all of these things and realize that no matter what the fuck happens, you're going to be okay. And
exactly.
you're going to exist, and your soul is impeccable. It's invincible.
Yeah.
Whatever happens to this body, to this form, the most important thing, your highest consciousness, your highest self, is going to be all right.
Yeah.
And you're going to be okay, no matter what the fuck happens. And then
totally.
As soon as you get that, so many things start to unravel, and then you can truly enjoy all of these things. People think that if you're not attached, you're not going to fully enjoy everything. You're not going to be invested. But it's bullshit. You just have natural, once you release attachment, then you can apply all the passion and zest and zeal and fearlessness to anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it is like, as I mentioned before, your controlled folly. Realizing that it's pointless. Realizing that this, whatever thing you're doing doesn't really have any true meaning, but you're going to enjoy it just like you would enjoy a fucking good movie or enjoy a great dream, and just live in it fully present, fully passionate, without having to apply the judgment of, oh, this doesn't really have any meaning. Just fucking live it.
Right. Of course. And the aspect that you talk about invincibility, about your soul being invincible, even on a semantic level, that kind of suggests some type of ego, with it being, I know of course what you mean, but if someone else takes that and they thinks my soul is invincible, but really, I think it's something more like water. It's like water is invincible. Go beat water with a stick and see what happens. Go shoot water and see what happens. Nothing. It's just water. Go freeze it. Go let it. And that's how
that's how we
operate.
Stronger. I imagine you could bind water to some other, in some fucking nuclear. I don't know.
And it is. You could, and then it's bound to everything. But but as a metaphor,
it's just. It really is. You can't. It's immutable. It would maybe even be another word.
That's like, I think that our, whatever is existing inside of our Muppet package that our bodies are, whatever that is, it's like
animating force. Don Miguel Ruiz calls it the animating force.
That works. Yeah. So whatever you want to call it, it's like water, man. It's like you can. It's there. It's just there, and it's gonna be on its course and on its path. And then whenever your package dies, or whenever you drop your body, as some people say, that water just evaporates. Mm-hmm. And then we all know what happens next. You get enough of that in the clouds, the shit rains, boom, you got more water down on this terrestrial plane. And that's just how human. But that water happens to land in more little human Muppet creatures, and then we go flopping around like a bunch of goofballs for 60 years, believing that the set that the Muppets are doing their show on is real. We go around believing that, and we think that there's no one pulling the strings, and that no one is in another dimension, which is on outside of the TV, watching us all laughing. And then it just keeps on happening. But that all that stuff that we were talking about actually leads into something really that I found quite interesting that I wanted to share, which was I recently had a pretty interesting experience, and that throughout your of course your day you get a little bit of anxiety, you have a little resting anxiety, a little bit of uncomfortableness, and that kind of comes and goes based on other things, of course. So I would find myself often, like through some self-examination, I would feel like sort of like not an anxiety per se, but like just this kind of force thing where it was uncomfortable, and I would feel like almost like I was raving, like energetically on the body. Where
so even you took some rolls.
Yeah, even if I was drinking something, I would just be like downing whatever it was. Yeah, sure. I'm just like talking to someone, like raving, trying to spin this thing and get the ideas. Go listen to some of the earlier podcasts, and that was I had that aspect in my being for like quite a long time, years, where I would just get so charged up. I was just like, and then other times, even during meditation, I would feel that too. During daily meditation, sure. I would start feeling this thing where I'm like so, hyped, or something. And then I would get often over the years where I'd be laying in bed and I would lay down to go to sleep, and I would feel the same thing, this hype thing, where my heart would be like pounding, mm-hmm. I'd just feel like my skin just like, and what's interesting is that I basically, through each kind of level of like new clarity that I've had in my life, there's been a long layer of not depression, but almost like this thing that feels like this mutedness of everything. It's like, make it depression without the sadness, right? Sure. Where you just feel like
a little bit of numbness.
Yeah, but in numbness without being like, not being open and feeling things, but just this kind of almost a detachment type of thing, but again, still, operating well within the system. So I started feeling that again, and I was thinking that perhaps, something was shifting. And usually I would joke about that being that feeling before some type of new awareness would be that you're mourning the death of your own ego that's dying or that you're letting go of, right?
Some part of your identity that you're having to let go.
Exactly. And so I started feeling that, but to a really extreme degree for several weeks. Normally it wouldn't last that long, and it kept continuing. And I was wondering, like, what has happened here? Have I broken something? Like, what is going on here, right? And so eventually I was laying in bed one night, and I was feeling that, and I started feeling this anxiety, energy, heart pumping thing, right? And in that state, I spoke with a really good friend of mine, and we talked about this a bit, and he suggested great advice, which is just be with that feeling. Don't try and examine that weird kind of down, detached feeling. Just experience that feeling. And I thought, all right, So I was laying in bed, and
experience the detachment or experience the anxiety.
Just the detachment. Just be with that instead of trying to understand what's happening, right? So I was laying in bed, and I started feeling that raging, heart pumping type of feeling. And normally, for years, I've basically just started doing meditative breathing to try and release that and dissipate that, slow the heart rate, and kind of get over it.
Do you have trouble sleeping?
No, not at all. I'm like half dead, man. Really easy. So, feeling that, and so I started thinking of the other advice. I thought, well, I'm just going to be with this feeling instead of trying to calm it down and get rid of it. I'm just going to experience it. So I started experiencing it, and then I got the bright idea of, instead of just trying to experience it, I was going to try and like suck it into me, like in meditation, where what I'll do is during meditation try and I'll pull in energy and vibration in the room into my lower body and move it up my torso into my head and into my heart. And
that's what I do when I can't sleep. I pull a lot of energy into my lower body by masturbating.
Well, yeah, that's nature's NyQuil, man. So anyway, during meditation I always do that. This is daily practice, for a long time. And so I thought, I'm going to try and pull this energy up instead of letting it just, whatever this anxiety is. And I started pulling it up, and I actually started it started vibrating, body started vibrating. I was laying there. I was like a sizzling piece of bacon, right? Laying there in bed, just feeling this thing. And then that energy shifted from feeling like anxiety to feeling like ecstasy, where I was just like, it felt like after like sex or something, your body is really sensitive. If someone was to touch your genitals again after sex, and it's like, whoa, you can't even stand another touch. Imagine your whole body feeling like that. I was feeling this thing where I was just like, and it's that anxiety turned from that feeling to just pure bliss and just ecstasy. And I realized in that moment that all over the years, that all of this stuff I was feeling, where I thought I was having these little moments of anxiety, was really just that I was getting into the situation I was in was a heightened, energetic situation. It was just bouncing around my body, and I didn't know what to do with it. And since it was the force that was kind of over for the meter of what I had to read, that force that was in there, it was a little anxiety inducing, because you didn't know what it was, and it was like, got too much gas in the tank here. What's going on? And so after drawing that upwards and releasing it, eventually all of that went away. I felt completely amazing, and I literally felt like if you had a bunch of strings inside of your body, and you had like a hand holding on to that. And that's your internal tension. I described in the past, sometimes I'd feel like there was a piece of paper just tearing perpetually inside of my chest or something like that. It's like that, or a hand holding on to these strings, know. I literally just felt that hand just release. It just let go in this moment, right? And I thought, that's interesting, Went to sleep. And since then, that is actually stuck, 100%. I felt like, I'm really not too sure what it was. That maybe is a part of letting go of something I needed to let go of. Yeah. But all of that edginess and that
So let's go through the methodology again, because that sounds great. Because I know that feeling that you're talking about, and it's on this borderline of anxiety and this this creative force that you want to harness,
right?
And depending on how you switch the knife blade, it can either be a resistance or it can be a tailwind. And I think the process you described is transforming it into something immensely positive, a positive feeling, an energetic feeling. So you were talking about magnifying that feeling by drawing it into your body, visualizing it. Go through that in a little bit more detail so you understand the mechanism for people who want to try it.
Totally. And I, subsequently, anytime I started to even feel like an inkling of pressure, or that uneasy, I would just draw it in, draw it up like meditation, right? So basically, if you feel that edginess feeling, that feeling of anxiety that everyone has, and that just kind of sizzling, butter in the skillet type of feeling inside your body, or the hive of angry bees, is worst case. That instead of allowing that to overtake you and allowing that to, induce anxiety, breathe that energy upwards like it's a meditation, and if you have no practice,
breathe that energy upwards. So what's the visualization that you're doing? What type of breath are you doing here?
Just normal breathing. If you can take a deeper breath, of course, that's healthy. I typically will expand my stomach as much as possible, and then as that fills to its height, then roll up the torso into the chest. So you're expanding outwards, and as that reaches its capacity, bring the chest upwards, and then decompressing the reverse way where it's letting your chest fall, and as that falls it pushes and rolls down to the stomach. So it's literally like this bag that's being opened and closed, so you're getting the fullest type of breath possible.
I imagine you could use an analogy of imagining some kind of flame inside yourself,
Sure.
And breathing in oxygen, giving it more air to feed the fire, and then as you breathe out the excess of that energy, and just stoke it hotter and hotter till it overcomes your body and you really feel that fully. It sounds like a visualization of just pure acceptance of that, instead of denying it. It's the same thing with pain. The way I read a great article, I think his name was Shinzen, but it was about how to deal with pain, and he was saying that really, and he deals with a lot of people suffering from some different types of chronic pain, and his concept is to go into that pain fully, experience it, feel it, accept it, instead of resisting it like, oh God, I wish this would go away, is this going to get worse, is it going to get, just go as deeply into that pain and feel it. And he said, and he was saying that that's a deeply purifying process, and as soon as you stop resisting it and accept it and go with it 100%, mentally, physically, emotionally, go into that pain, it becomes purifying and no longer becomes suffering, and becomes a different, feeling when you go that deeply into your pain. It seems like that can be applied, and I hadn't even thought of it that way, but applied to anxiety, applied to depression, applied to loss. And I talked about that in my most recent video with, if a poet suffers a tragedy, she does not claw in panic from the depths of despair. She digs deeper. And it's that kind of same concept where instead of running away from it, just fucking go into it.
Yeah, and my thought in that moment of that experience, the deepest experience, was I was thinking, I'm just going to get on the other side of this. And it's being there with it, and then taking that step back, where you're just like, okay, there it is. Now I'm observing this feeling as opposed to being consumed by it, you know? And I think that's could be really useful to, in the moments where you start to feel anxiety, that thinking about, we apply these images and these definitions to things in the human experience, but, I start thinking about, where do those definitions come from? There's so much anxiety in our culture. So many people take Xanax and, opiates and drink and stuff heavily to try and get rid of that stuff. And it's like, well, what is that exactly? That's another thing I've thought about. Why are we just calling it this thing, anxiety, whenever the notion of words are so subjective, and so semantically, it's just hilarious.
You see that with ADD. I mean, that's one of the worst labelings of any kind of condition, because now you take all culpability for what's going on in your mind,
exactly,
and saying, I got it.
ADD, and
I got it. So I need a drug, and it's my thing, it's my condition. This is my story. So I can't help it.
Yeah, and with
You know what I
fear,
mean?
people feel fear. They feel, you know, disappointment with themselves. They feel worry. I mean, those are all normal, natural things to feel. But then people often don't even know how to deal with those feelings themselves, so they just get scared by it, and therefore, oh, that's just anxiety. I have anxiety. I'm working really hard. I have too much anxiety. It's like, well, no, perhaps that it's a lot more complex than just saying that everything is anxiety. Perhaps it's not even something that's bad. Perhaps it's something that's deeper than that, which is what I was trying to get
Or
to
it's
earlier.
just
Is
an
that
indicator
it's
of work that needs to be done. It's like, hey, go into this room. Like the idea of moving towards resistance, I think is one of the strongest concepts you can have. When you see something like that, instead of going, fuck, I got this, let's try and escape from it, escape, run, trick it, get away. Just say, okay, here's resistance. Let me just move straight into that and see what happens on the other side. See what happens when I tame it. And that's what you have to do with psychedelics. You get a nightmarish vision. You try to run from that, it'll chase you down and rip you to fucking shreds. So the methodology of witness and allow, go into it. See what happens. Oh, there's, you're visioning spiders coming inside your body and exploding through your flesh. Well, go into that. Let more come. Ask more to come. Have them come through. And you pass through those thoughts out the other side rather than running away. And it's the same lessons that you can apply to life.
Yeah, I think that my approach to that is instead of running through it, just being a bit more meta about it and getting out of my body and out of my mind and thinking, oh, there it is. There it is. It's just happening right now. And like the body, I'll feel, oftentimes if I feel those type of emotions, I'll just think, oh, it's so weird that this vehicle, it's like if you turn and your tire squeaks or something in your car, or your car, or you accidentally go to open your gas tank and you pop your trunk, it's like, that's how I look at the body a lot, where I'm just like, oh, that's weird. That thing, my car, my meat car is feeling this weird thing right now, and it'll work itself out.
I had great advice. I have a kind of one of my spiritual teachers here, name's Ted, and he was telling me how he uses the same thing. When he's feeling something that isn't enjoyable, he says, well, Ted's feeling sad today. So he removes himself from what that, not only just body, but what that ego, what the mind, what everything else that's going on. Ted's a little angry right now. Yeah. Ted's feeling a little sad right now.
That's an old yogi trick, the witness, exactly. The watching. Another interesting byproduct of that experience I had was that I realized that after that there's no guidebook, man, for how to deal with energy. And whenever you become awake to those things, it's like whenever your senses keep stacking and you get that extra sense where you can sense and feel energies and people's energies and the energies of a room, and then even greater than that, the energies within yourself. There's no rule for that, right? And what was interesting is that it not, as a person, people try and be good people, right? For the most part. I think a lot of people try and do their best. Of course, we all, you could sideline a million sidelines to that. Everyone rationalize things, blah, 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 blah. But for the most part, people try and be good, what they know as good. They try and, take care of their business or what have you. And of course, a lot of people also unconsciously manipulate other people. They unconsciously kind of lie to other people and themselves to get what they want. And they're not necessarily doing it consciously, thinking, oh, I'm going to go rip this guy off, I'm going to do this. But they kind of gently massage what they're saying in order to create, an angle and a viewpoint on that thing to hopefully come out with a particular solution.
Right.
Now, what I started realizing was that why does that stop there? That type of behavior and that type of, the conduits of the mind, that perhaps that goes a layer deeper into that one of an energetic layer, where whenever you become aware of those things, you can feel those energies in your body, and you start being able to feel the energies in others and whatnot. And, the collection of a bunch of people together, that feeling. And perhaps I thought I should be aware of how I'm treating and acknowledging and working with that awareness of said energies. And after that experience, one of the things I started realizing was that that my intentions were good, but whenever I would see people that I haven't seen, or see someone order at a coffee shop or something like that, or at a bar, or what have you, or even checking out in a grocery store or something, whenever you talk to that person, I would often, if not every time, try and pull some of the energy up and blast it, having the ability to shoot that out of my body and my eyes at people. And I know that probably sounds odd to some casual listeners of this, but it's something that happens, trying to shoot that at them. And the idea is to try and have some good positive vibrations, blast that out of yourself at somebody who's a stranger, right? And you could tell that they could feel it, and
Sure.
they get smiley, they kind of perk up a little bit, and they almost are a little bewildered or something like that, and kind of drunk on your energy that you give them. And I started thinking, what, that's actually although the intentions were good, that's actually a bit of a manipulation. And it's also a bit of a sense of fear of your own internal self. Because if you're going up to these people and, people that you meet, and you're giving them, trying to really playing out this whole good energy thing, giving it to them and allowing them to do that, and then facilitating it and growing that into this, quick transaction, what's really happening on an energetic level is that you are distracting them. You're kind of like, in order to feel comfortable and be in control of the situation yourself, you're setting up this energetic interaction, which is you are the light that is shining on them, instead of them being the light to shine on you, or vice versa. And so what you're doing is you're creating a safe area where your energy can be protected, and your internal self can be protected in that situation.
And it depends on your perspective, though. I mean, it depends on why you're doing it. Because
Because
the net positive, I mean, I think you have to be careful not to prevent yourself from doing something that's a net positive, because that's a net positive transaction.
Well, I agree with you in one extent, where you
could apply that to all good actions.
No, but
every good action stops because you're saying, well, perhaps there is some motivation of me doing the good action, so I would feel better. And if you took it down to that level, you could completely grind to a halt every good deed ever done by mankind, every courageous act, every act
I see what
of
you're
love
saying.
and generosity and kindness. You could say, well, it wasn't completely pure because there was some feedback.
Right. I see what you're saying. But what I mean is that the ones that you're consciously doing, where you walk up to someone and you go, I'm going to give them this blast of energy. Not the natural, warm transaction of just two people interacting. That's beautiful, But I mean the thought of walking into a place and going, okay, I'm walking up to that person, draw the energy in, build it, and push it out whenever you interact with them, and watch their eyes light up, That's what I'm talking about. I should have made that more clear. So, thinking of that, what that's doing is that's feeding your own ego, because you leave there thinking, dun, 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 they were so enamored by what I was able to show them and what I shined on them.
That's a byproduct of something that's a net positive reaction. I think I see what you're saying, and you're right on a technical standpoint, but I think you also have to accept these. You have to. It's almost like collateral damage, if you want to call it, but you have to accept some collateral cost to a net positive transaction, and if you don't, I think for me it's more utilitarian. Is what's happening, is the good that's happening from giving that person an injection of positive energy, which is going to improve their mood, improve the quality of their dream for that day, is that worth the potential the potential manipulation that I'm doing to my own ego? Can I handle that? Yes, I can. Is that a net positive? So should I continue it? I think, in my opinion, if you're able to do that, I think since it's a net positive, the answer is yes, you should. Just being aware of what that there is a cost, that there is something that's happening different, I think is the only piece that you should be aware. As a piece of whenever you give something, when you give a great Christmas present, there's a lot of fucking good feelings you have, and it's coming. Some are pure and some are coming to inflate your ego of, I'm able to give you this great gift. Look how thoughtful I am. Your positive reaction is going to make me feel better. There's no kind of the purity of that act is going to be mixed. But is it a net positive? Sure. But you got to be cognizant of that because, especially when I was in Africa, I saw this a lot. I saw a lot of people helping, the African kids and things, which was net positive, but the way that it was happening was they were feeding this kind of messiah ego need, where it was like, look at the kids following me, look what I'm able to give them, and that was justifying something. And the only piece that was missing was the awareness of that. And you clearly have the awareness of that. You're aware of what that's doing to yourself. And then I think you can still choose to do that and just be aware of all of the factors that are present.
I think so. I think that there's a level. There's, of course, everything's operating on a lot of levels. I think that that's one level, and I think that that's somewhere towards the top. I see that I totally agree with what you're saying. That if you, from your perspective, what you want to do with yourself, where you are on your own path, in your internal finding, of course, we're all just really searching for ourselves. If you're trying to get to that core of yourself, and you think that through those interactions, the intentional ones, of course, as I made clear earlier, of giving a person the positive energy, if you're okay with the fact that that's feeding your spiritual ego or whatever you want to call it, so be it. I think that there's a level below that I've been scraping at and accessing, which has been very curious to me, where after these experiences I was talking about, I stopped going, and trying to give off that positive thing. And I did that with friends too. I stopped trying to, charge up this whole, like Baraka in Street Fighter, charge up this, okay, let's go.
Blanca. Blanca is who you're talking about.
Who's it?
Blanca?
Blanca? Oh, I thought his name was, Blanca. All right. The green.
Baraka was the guy in Mortal Kombat with the...
Right. Oh, yeah. That's an important distinction. So, the green guy from Street Fighter. So, anyway, the point is that I thought I'm going to just stop that as an experiment, and just see what changes, instead of trying to deliver the energetic payload. And what started happening was that even things like love and positivity, kindness, all of those things just kind of started evaporating and falling away. And I got this sense of kind of excavating that a little bit. This sense that all of that shit, like love is a big example. It's this plane. I started feeling this plane, right? This like, it's almost like a big table or something, like this huge 20-foot diameter table under my feet or something, or around my ankles, where it was like hovering around and following me, right? And it was like this thing it's unspoken, right? It's not tap dancing. Like love and kindness, those things aren't theatrical. You don't have to go up and tap dance and go, oh, because of the paradigms in which humans have agreed upon, I need to smile and hug you and say, oh, how's it going? It's so great to see you. I love you. That's all just theatrics. Right. That's not real. That's not the real energy of love. That's not loving awareness, the universal energy and consciousness. What it is this deeper fog. It's this thing that's way below all of that. And I started feeling in touch with that, And so instead of...
Well, that seems more like just being present in the moment rather than allowing the judge to be always looking at, well, what am I doing? Am I playing to happiness? Am I playing to love? It seems like what you're talking about is when you're in that fully present moment, a moment of true presentness, then those emotions and those feelings are pure, and come naturally. When you can take that other element out where you're judging your actions and analyzing them and seeing how you can create and do those things. I still think you can choose to do those, but I agree with you. Those primal, deeper forces come when you're fully present.
Yeah, and it's where it's, as opposed to trying to move energy with friends and people you meet, where you're tap dancing and doing this performance of those things.
Especially with friends. I still think that stranger game you're playing is rad, because these people, I think about that sometimes when I'm checking out at a grocery store. I roll into Whole Foods and sometimes I'm distracted and I just phone it in, I smile and hey, blah blah blah. And sometimes I really look them in the eye and I just engage
blast
them.
Away.
Yeah, and
energetic bukkake.
And they're in a whole span of days, if more people do that, they're going to come home happier themselves. They're going to feel better. So it's just a little effort that I could make that could improve their experience.
And you're right.
And I should, totally. I think that it's something you should do. Try and blast that to strangers, because so many times people are always doing the opposite. Probably unaware, but vampiring other people's energy, sucking all that. So anytime you can inject.
I was at a grocery store the other day, and I was copping some fish oil, and the person that worked.
What are you doing copping fish oil at the grocery store? God damn it, Cory Allen. We're here on it. You can get your fish oil right from us.
Will do. So I was there, and this person I was talking to actually reached over and touched my arm, and then said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I was like, "What?" And they said, "I just wanted to absorb some of your energy right quick. It's like blasting off of you." And I was like, man, talk about a blatant energy thief. Like literally grabbing it off of you.
That's funny.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I totally feel what you're saying. And this whole thing, it's levels, man. There's different levels. I think
the key thing that you mentioned is the awareness of it. Be aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the cost is, and then make a decision.
Yeah, but do you want to operate where you are, as a consciousness? Do you want to operate on the first level of? It's a charge and discharge. It's just this pull trend, and that's great, and it's great, and it'll get people over. But I think that I don't think
you have to choose one, though. I think you can choose to run the gamut.
I think that that thing of going and giving people the blast of energy intentionally, I think that thing is still intertwined with the self a lot. And what I'm talking about is something.
Yeah, but you can choose to be intertwined with the self and then choose to detach from it. You know what I'm saying? I think where we maybe have a slight difference of opinion is you're saying, operating in one mode of consciousness. I'm saying operate in all the fucking modes of consciousness you want. Dabble in this mode, dabble in that mode, dabble in this mode. There's no restrictions or absolutes. There's no just because you have this car, it means this thing, or just because you choose which mode you want to be in, you choose your relationship to it. As long as you're aware and honest with what's going on, then you really have full freedom to run the game.
I agree. I think that giving the level 1, let's call it that, about passing energy intentionally to strangers, that's like giving someone a Blu-ray of Anchorman 2. It's funny, and it's going to get you through the night, and it's really enjoyable, and then you'll joke about it. But I think what I'm talking about is trying to give someone a Kurosawa movie. It's the same thing. Neither, they're not bad. They're both good. And the fact that a human can be conscious of those things at all is great. But it's about what level you want to work on, and what level the work's going to be done on. And for me, excavating and exploring that deeper aspect of those things has seemed a lot more honest and beneficial and good, because I can still feel it's like if you carry that thing around with you as much as you can, you have access to that cloud of that feeling. It goes to where you don't even need to communicate it. You don't need to do the acting out of trying to give them. Right. It's this thing where. Well, now now what you're saying is you're able to do that more effectively by not trying to do it. It's like doing that. Perhaps it's doing that outside of the ego. It's doing that outside of the vested ego. Rather, of course, we're always going to be dealing with ego. Right. But yeah, so interesting stuff to deal with and to watch out for. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously, if you're anytime you try too hard, you usually, are missing what you're really fully capable of. So I get that point, but I think that I guess the caveat for me is that. Sometimes you're not going to feel that innately. Sometimes you're just going to be distracted. And if the choice is to getting in that deeper, resonating presentness, in your interaction with another individual, it's not going to be fucking possible for most people. So if the choice is, I don't have it, so I'm just not going to do it. Or the choice is, I could fucking rev it up, get it mostly real, and pass it. I think the net positive transaction is to do that. And I think you can also do that and just be like sincere about it without trying to have to rev it up and deliver it. You can just go in and be a nice, like kind, open presence without trying to like
Sure.
do the whole puppet dance. And I think that, in that first level, I think that's what makes most sense to me. If you, and that's good, that's healthy, because I think you can still, perhaps you can still do that without, and that's just good, healthy human interaction.
Sure.
But
I think that's the default.
And one of the things, that I've been thinking about the last year or so a lot more about is that there's just no, no one people don't often talk about. Everyone talks about the spiritual ideas and getting in tune with energy and meditation and psychedelic states, but there's a lot of missing the conversation about the sides of that can be a bit tricky. People don't ever talk about it, man. I never hear people talk about it.
And it's the practicality of these issues. I think, I agree.
It's a big thing. Yeah, you never say, "Are you being energetically?"
People are so worried about getting the base concept and explaining it. I had that experience just recently. I was talking about the soul animating the body, right? Which to me is like me and you talk about. That's a premise in the rest of our discussion.
Yeah,
right? It's already agreed upon. But I was talking to a friend, and she was like, "Well, that's your opinion." Right at that point, where I was saying this, the spirit, the higher consciousness, the animating force animates the body, which is the Muppet. And she was like, "Well, that's your opinion." I said, "Well, I guess for you could take that as an opinion of mine, but for me, that's knowledge. So I don't think that I have an opinion that I prefer." Fucking black cars or something like that, and I could acknowledge that being an opinion of mine that is not bound in some kind of universal truth. But for me, that is a truth that I'm saying. But for other people, it's still in that, that's his belief or his opinion about that.
And that's the thing.
So much of all the talk is to talk to people who are still debating whether that's in your opinion or your fact. But the actual practicality of maneuvering energy, it requires the acceptance of certain premises,
for sure,
which most people don't have. I was talking to someone who was talking about that show Cosmos that's on right now, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they were saying that it's a little bit frustrating because they could tell that some of that is aimed at creationists, because they keep saying things like, if the world really was 6,500 years old, so they're aware that not everybody's already accepting the premise that
it's also
these
good
stars
science,
are old as fuck, and these.
It's good science to not be an absolutist about everything, because you never know. It's like whenever you go a couple hundred years ago, and it's like clearly all of the scientists have agreed that, to quote Monty Python, if she weighs as much as a duck, then she's made of wood, and therefore she's a witch. So it's kind of like and that's kind of a lot of that stuff that I read. It's very absolute-y, and I think that it's wise to keep your consciousness malleable. And that's one of the most basic things that I bring this up to friends of mine. I think they're tired of hearing me talk about it. I bring it up all the time. It's one of the most basic understandings that if humans, if they taught the idea of the subjective reality, in the human nervous system in school, the world would be a much different place, because, and I think I might have talked about this last time, because it's something that is so important, it should be pondered drastically, is that the world inside of your skin, inside of your nervous system, is your subjective singular reality, and everyone is experiencing their own subjective abstraction of the objective universe. There's this hazy existential landscape that all of these crazy, atomic particles, radio waves, heat, gases, all of this stuff experiences, and our TV antenna as the human nervous system can only read this 1% of what's going on out there, and we're all watching different televisions, so we're all experiencing a different version of the same reality. Also, based upon past experience, the association with certain things, and your perspective on life, and that's been imprinted upon you.
I agree. I think that's important, but I also think there needs to be room for. There needs to be room for universals too, and I think that's something that people with this subjective reality kind of concept, that's where to me it goes too far, where there's no longer any universal good or bad. Everything is subjective morality, subjective. I had this come up when I made a post on my Facebook page about clitoridectomies, which is where
yeah.
they literally hack out the clitoris.
You ever read that book Saharasia by James DeMeo?
No, I haven't.
Don't.
Yeah, I know, it's fucking horrifying. But you think of the clitoris as like, oh, you just slice off the tip. No, they got to dig that thing out.
And
it's
then
all these nerve endings.
There's flaying of the penis in the Aboriginals where they cut the skin off of the penis.
Right,
There's
but at least the penis fucking grows back.
Yeah, and there's infibulation where they cut off the clitoris and then sew the whole thing shut. It's horrendous.
Right.
Well, that was I thought of a great punk, a female punk band name was the Infibulators. Imagine if if there's a band out there that wants to kind of usurp Pussy Riot, dude, and the Infibulators.
Too far.
You can have that.
And speaking of too far, that's the kind of the point that I'm making is that some people were saying, and I was saying one of the problems is that the young girls, to stop this practice, the problem is that the young girls have bought into the story that creates a woman.
Yeah.
So for them, they feel that they need to do that to become a woman. So even if those practices aren't currently being practiced, they'll find a way to make it done. So you can't just ban the practice because they want it to happen. So they'll find a way. Some fucking other person who believes the story or is a complete sadist, one or the other, they'll find that avenue to do it. So the only way to do it is to educate them that story isn't necessarily real. But the whole premise that we should try and curb clitoridectomy, some people were having offense to.
Yeah.
And, to me, that's where this kind of
Men.
relative, they were saying, well, man, that's their culture. Who are you to say that they shouldn't do that? I'm like, there's a universal value of having a clitoris for a human's life.
And that's
that if they're being misled by a story, it should be universally lauded to try and give them another option.
Totally.
So that they don't have to buy into that fucking story and go through life without a clitoris.
Yeah, and that's the difference. So there's laws of nature, and then there's laws of psychology.
Right.
And your psychological perspective is the one that's subjective. The laws of nature and the laws of the universe are the ones that are universal.
Right.
It's very simple.
It.
Well, it's very simple. If you think about the thing that really broke free that to me was the Buckminster Fuller thing of the non-simultaneous interactive apprehended processing.
Yeah, that did that for a lot of people. Just kidding. Nobody knows the fuck you're talking about.
Well, there's this thing where...
and we got about 5 minutes, so we got to wrap this up here, Cory. So.
Okay. Bucky Fuller, man, he talked about non-simultaneous interactive apprehended processing, and this is something that Robert Anton Wilson talked about a lot, and it's where it introduced me, to this concept, is that... you can look up his much better description of the process, but I'll give you a short one here. Is that non-simultaneous, means that the universe is occurring, in real time all the time, regardless of your plotting and your human perception of time and space and all those things. Outside of your linearity of the human understanding of time, universe is occurring simultaneously. Right now, as we're talking, there's someone going to bed in a Chinese hotel room. There's someone in Australia that's eating lunch right now. It's all happening, And then, of course, the simultaneous it leads to that thing where it's all occurring simultaneously. Apprehending suggests that it's all occurring simultaneously, and your brain is like a flashlight shining out into where you are in space-time, continuously apprehending that moment. And processing is you process that information and you interact with it, which that's the cyclical feedback loop of consciousness. Your brain has got this, it's like this little dotted line in a circle where you're this little flashlight scavenging in the dark. And there's this feed in and feedback thing where your reality is constantly being absorbed by your nervous system into your brain. Your brain is creating your consciousness and it's flowing outward. So you're continuously feeding back with your environment. And what I did was I said that over and over and over, and there's a big difference between thinking of a concept and living a concept, and whenever it's applied to your reality versus just thinking of it on paper. And this is when I was like 18 or something, I'd walk around just saying non-simultaneous interactive apprehended processing, non-simultaneous interactive apprehended processing, and one day I was standing at a urinal in public and I was non-simultaneous interactive apprehended processing, and it hit me, it just popped, much like the mic probably did when I did that. And it just hit me and everything was like, wow, yeah, this is like, I can see that flashlight reality now. And I understand the way the universe operates. That's why, at that moment I understood why Ulysses was such a great book as well. It's the exact same thing. It's that in literary form. Sure. Tim Leary said that Ulysses prepared everyone for the first psychedelic experience, and perhaps Finnegan's Wake is preparing us for our last psychedelic experience. If you've ever tried to read that monster.
I haven't tried that one.
But the basic, if you want to break down everything we've been talking about in summation, since we probably have about a minute and a half
Sum
left,
it up in a minute.
Is that your reality is your reality. It's only that, and perhaps a wise thing to do is to question the fact that your world and the person you're interacting with's world are conflicting. They probably are, but know that. And when you're interacting with people, keeping that in mind and allowing the compassion and the patience to know that we're all experiencing different realities in this world, and none of us are right, and none of us are wrong. It's just this giant...
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think some of us are wrong. Because I think some people do violate those universals, those laws of nature.
Of course, I mean that within the spectrum of your own psychology, that we're all just experiencing this thing together. It's just this transient hallucination, man. We're all actors playing on this big drama stage.
Yeah, and the wisdom, I actually got that wisdom in an ayahuasca trip when I was flying along with this condor, with this eagle, and the eagle said to me, you want to know the secret to seeing? And I said, yeah, sure. And it said, see through everyone else's eyes. And at that point, I understood what he meant, but the eagle spirit meant in that, you can't judge anybody until you've actually literally seen what they're experiencing. That's how you actually get to see what the world is. It's not by seeing through your own eyes, your own cognitive limitations, your own prism, but actually see through everybody else's eyes, and then you'll really see the world.
Yeah, and if you see someone that's being nasty and being angry or being, manipulative or whatnot, I used to look at those people and be like, it's a virus, And now I look at those people and I feel bad for them. I think, my God, they're just working out that karma, man. Yeah, they're on that. That's their plane. They're on that level.
It's a feeling of instead of animosity, it's a feeling of empathy.
Yeah, it's like imagine what their whole life, their whole world is that. And those people need nurture as much as possible.
Cory Allen, you're a bad motherfucker.
Thank you.
Appreciate this. Anybody who's anybody who walks around in a urinal saying the mantra that you did at 18, obviously this is the end result, and it's a beautiful thing. So I appreciate you coming by and
absolutely
and rapping here with me. People, you can find Cory Allen at Quiet Design, right?
Yeah, at Quiet Design. Cory, CORY-Allen.com, and you might be able to find me in person. Yeah. Maybe we'll be walking around and I'll run into you and you'll be like, wow, I just found Cory Allen.
Yeah.
You can find me there. I think about Twitter followers. I think about if you have 1,000 followers, every time I'm about to tweet, I kind of laugh because I imagine the reality of that. What if you turned around, there's just a crowd of 1,000 people watching you. By the way, I just had a great sandwich. Everyone's like, thanks,
That's funny. All right, my man.
All right.
Good stuff.
Much love, everybody.